Welcome to my night terrors. If you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing to my channel. With that said, please enjoy this video. Me and my family had just recently relocated to the state of Utah, just outside the town of Ballard to be exact. I got offered a job as a purchasing agent for a local construction company in the area. While living here, it wasn't long before I found out about tales of the Skinwalker Ranch. It was a short drive from my property, just southeast from it. To be honest, I didn't believe in any of that type of stuff. I thought it to be just a myth created from folklore. This story will explain how my beliefs dramatically changed on one very surreal night less than a year ago. When I moved to Ballard, it was the first time I've ever lived outside a big city. Being in this rural secluded area was definitely hard to get used to, so I made the best of the situation. I found some new hobbies, one of them being rock hounding. When I wasn't too busy with work, I would take my son out with me to go see if we could find any good specimens. Our house sat on about 10 acres. One afternoon, me and my son set off to go explore some of the property and see if we could find any cool rocks. After combing through a few acres, we came to a rocky hill that descended down about 100 feet or so. I knew my property ended somewhere before this, but my son pointed out some really cool pieces of petrified wood littered on and around the hill. We decided to head down the hill carefully. We searched around the base of the hill for a few hours, collecting some really cool pieces off the surface. Our pockets were starting to get full when I decided we better head back for the day. I had no idea whose property we were on, and I didn't want to press our luck any further. Just as we were about to climb back up the hill, my son noticed something shiny sticking out of the ground. Upon further inspection, he discovered that it was a limb cast, a tree branch covered long ago by volcanic ash, eventually having its cavities filled with the colorful agate material. It was stunningly beautiful. We tried pulling on it, but it was buried well. "You'll have to come back some other time," I told him. We didn't have anything to pry it out with. That's when he pointed over to a group of trees across from us. Among them was a very old-looking rundown shack of some kind. I didn't notice this before. And here it was, not very far from where we were. How odd, I thought to myself. I made sure to look over the whole area before coming down here, to make sure there wasn't anything like this. Here it was now, plain as day. I grabbed my son by the wrist. "Come on, let's go," I told him. "But Dad," he said, "maybe there's something in there we can use to unbury this thing. I can go check really quick." "Son, we don't even know who owns that. Your house could be very close. It shouldn't even be down here in the first place." "I'm going to go check, Dad. It will be fine. I'll be quick." He then freed himself from my grip and started running to the shed. "Wait, damn it!" I screamed at him, but he was already well on his way. "Shit," I said to myself. "Be careful and hurry," I yelled at him. After a few minutes, he came running back, with something in his hands. "This is all I could find," he said. He handed it to me. It was a very long piece of rebar. "What else was in there?" I asked him. "It was all locked up," he said. "I found this around back." "Dad, let's get this rock and get out of here. I got a bad feeling when I was over there. There were these weird symbols traced on the ground." "Symbols? What kind of symbols?" I asked. "I have no idea, Dad. I've never seen anything like them before." This intrigued me. "Here," I said, "work on this rock and quickly. I'm going to go over here and take a leak." I started heading over to the shack. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm just going to take a peek. Don't worry. Just hurry up and get that rock out, okay?" "But Dad..." "Don't worry," I yelled. He just gave me a disapproving look. Started then to work on the limb cast. The shack looked older than I thought. Sure enough, it had a padlock on it. I walked around the back. There they were. A bunch of strange symbols traced in the dirt. I bent down. They looked fresh, too. This frightened me. "Okay, it's time to go," I said. When I stood up, I swear I saw someone staring at me from behind a tree across the yard. I stood there froze, trying to focus my eyes on this thing, when I heard my son start to yell, "Dad, come here, hurry!" This took my attention away from the tree for a moment. When I looked back, I didn't see anyone there. I started to run back to my son, shrugging this off as just me being paranoid. When I got out into the open, I saw what he was yelling at me about. There was a light to my right, It looked like it could be a car coming. I ran to my son, who was hiding behind a rock. It was starting to get dark now. What do we do now, Dad? Let's just stay here for a minute. If we start up the hill, they will see us. We cowered behind the rock for almost half an hour. The light wasn't moving, but it was brighter now, as it got even darker. What the hell are they doing, Dad? I don't know, son. What if they saw us earlier, he said, obviously very panicked now. This made me think of the person I thought I saw staring at me from behind the tree. Maybe they did, I said nervously. Just then my son began to scream. He threw down the limcast onto the ground. Are you crazy, I said. Be quiet, would you? But it started to get cold in my hand, he said. I bent down and felt the limcast. It was ice cold. I stood up slowly, looking at my son, my eyes wide. What can cause that, he started to ask me, fear in his voice. And suddenly the light disappeared. Okay, let's go. Now's our chance. I grabbed his wrist. Stop, he said, listen. There was someone moaning in great pain. It was coming from the shack. It sounded like a woman. I have to go help her, he said. Son, no. You said yourself you got a bad feeling. So did I. We can call the police when we get back. Do not go. He was gone. He was halfway to the shack when I started to yell at him. Son, no, stop! The light then appeared right in front of my son, blinding me. I covered my eyes when the light shot directly up, fading into the night sky. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. I had no answer for what I just saw. My son had just vanished with this light. I ran up to where he was, where this happened. There was no trace of him that I could see anywhere. I fell to my knees. I began to cry out for my son. When I started to hear the lady moaning again, I looked ahead and could see a very tall figure in front of the shack. It was hunched over. The voice was coming from this creature. I stood up and started to scream at this thing. Where is my son? What have you done with him? It stopped moaning and stood upright on its hind legs. Its arms were very long, almost dragging on the ground. It looked as if it had very long hair coming from its elongated head. I stopped yelling. This thing started to move in my direction. I turned to run, but then anger started to build up. This thing had my son. So I turned and faced this thing, as it stood right in front of me now. I could smell its foul breath as it lowered its fleshy white covered eyes down to level with mine. I was shaking horribly. I closed my eyes. It then lowered its very large hand onto my head. I'm not afraid. Do you hear me? But I was very afraid. It knew I was afraid. I then felt it shake my head violently. When I opened my eyes, there was my son, standing over me. He was shaking me. Dad, he said. Wake up. You passed out. What? I replied. When? When you touched the rock. The light's gone now. Let's go. Should we take the rock? I yelled at my son. Leave it. Don't touch it. Don't ever touch it. I said, completely overcome with fear and confusion. Let's go, I said. We climbed back up the hill and made our way back to the house. I told my son he was never allowed to go back down there again, and I would buy him all the cool rocks he wanted online. In fact, I'm in the process of building a fence in our property line, just above the hill. It's actually going to be far enough back, you can't even see down that hill. Whatever that was, Skinwalker, a demon, I don't know. One thing I know for sure is that it didn't want us there, especially disturbing its land.